we couldn't do this without Gene Warren, an integral part of the special effects, created the special effects, the optical effects in Killer Klowns from Outer Space. We'd worked with Gene and Leslie in the past, and they were perfect for this. So we went to them and said, please, do the effects for Killer Klowns for us.
They were also right out back.
Yeah, we were
down
next
the
door
alley.
neighbors.
We were next door neighbors.
We came to Gene and said, we need all these things, done, and presented Gene with a bunch of storyboards, specifically, all the scenes that had to do, all the opticals with the cocoon rays, anything with rays and cocoons. A lot of the matte paintings were done by Mark Sullivan, but the key matte painting in the beginning, the landing of the spacecraft, and the climax explosion of the tent were done by Ken Marshall over at Gene's studio. Gene had to speed up optically a chase scene when the ice cream truck was chasing the clown car, because we were prohibited from speeding in the community in Santa Cruz, so it just was a little too slow for a chase. So Gene stepped it up a bit optically. Little things like that, on top of everything else. The big sequence was the arena that we had to duplicate, the giant clown arena, the battle with Clownzilla, the destruction of the ice cream truck, and the final destruction of the clown spaceship. This was the scale. And what did you guys put in this to light it? Do you remember?
I don't remember exactly, but there were a lot of lights in order to get the glows. And
this is half of it. There was a fluorescent ballast in there, and it was lit with fluorescent fixtures, and it was supported on here on a motor so it could rotate. So that's how it was done, and it was, the camera was moved since it was shot against black, I believe. So you get the vertical movement from moving the camera, and then it was composited into our amusement park plates in Santa Cruz. And the neat gag was when you drew the Christmas lights or the clown lights into the thing, which was basically holding this thing in the foreground close to the camera and having a tube with the lights coming out of it and pulling the Christmas lights in through the
that was
tube.
that was another perspective shot.
What was the trick on setting those things up? When you're setting up a perspective shot, what's the...
Well, given the fact that you weren't really bigger, we went into going into slightly wider lenses in order to increase your height. We did put you up in the air, but it just looks a lot higher than it is when you go to a 18mm lens. The perspective shots now that we did down here were a little different because we were also shooting at very high speed.
Action! Get her out of here, Mike! No, now, Mike! Come on, guys, move! Barker. We can't, Debbie. Okay, here we go. Action! Mike, get her out of here!
No!
Now, Mike!
Dave!
Come on, guys, move! Barker.
Explain to the fans, the rate that you choose, the frame rate, and why you choose to 200 or 300 frames per second.
Come on, you!
That the normal operating speed of a camera is what?
24 frames per second. So, well, it has to do with the scale and how far something moves by gravity. It's the best way to determine it. If I drop something 30 feet, it takes 1 second to fall. And if you build something half scale, 15 feet high, it's only going to take approximately a half second to fall. There is the acceleration rates, but just to make it simple, so you would shoot somewhere close to 48 frames a second twice to make it appear that action would happen the same it would at full scale. And the same thing, if you drop down to 1/4 size, you'd have to keep increasing your frame rate.
So
now, it doesn't work 1-to-1.
Yeah, so I was 30 feet
close.
tall. I was 30 feet tall.
You were supposed to be 30 feet
So we had to
tall.
shoot, what, 6 times?
Well, we did most of the stuff with you 4, because there is a point of diminishing returns on this. And some things act the same no matter what, like water. You always have a hard time with water because it doesn't want to do anything other than what it does. You can slow it down, but a water drop only gets so big. And I think everybody's seen that a lot when tiny little boats or something.
Yeah, the water's the tough thing. Luckily, we didn't have clowns in water on this one. But what I want to say to the fans, it's very important to study your math in school, because mathematics comes into this, calculating all those frame rates and stuff.
Yeah, so let's get a figure out right now. 2 frames a second. To get 1 second, we've got to go 12. 12. So you
Go ahead and move it now,
Lex. What do we want on this? About
Five. I don't know, about 6. Should have 6.
I remember that because of the accelerated frame rate, that I had to do things 3 or 4 times faster. So I had to hit my marks like this, where in film it looks like I'm going pounding maniacally on this on the ice cream truck. I was actually beating a drum really fast.
So on action, Charlie, you start dragging that thing towards you. 1, 2, 3. Get your feet locked real good.
1, 2, 3 now.
And follow through. Even if it's not a good throw, I want you to follow through.
Okay.
Just get that bottom towards us, that's all. All right. Lights on in the back. Lights on in the truck. Here we go. Speed!
Action!
1, 2, 3 now.
It's real good.
Can you hold it right there for a second, Charles,
Oh,
please?
it's now the nose of the truck
Oh, but it fell back in.
is in. You'd be out of it. Come on, look and see how it ends.
You know, there was some matte paintings. To me, the complex thing, and we shot the background plate of the cops in the parking lot, basically cut off, you know, half of the frame, the upper half of the frame. And you had your matte artist, Ken Marshall, come in and composite a very complicated rotating tent, explosion effects, fireworks effects, reactive lighting on the matte painting. The other sequences that, you know, I remember I did the original matte painting for the landing of the spaceship. I'm an illustrator, but not necessarily a matte artist. So when I showed him the forest scene, you know, Gene immediately saw it and said, well, we need to build more contrast. I can't get an exposure off of this. And he turned it over to Ken Marshall. Ken did a repaint on it, and they used that as the painting. It was night and day. I had built like a hazy fog look into the thing, and when I saw Ken's painting, I knew what it had to be a good matte painting. The shadow gag is another. It's again my favorite sequence in the movie. Again, we keep saying we didn't use stop motion in our own movie. Well, what we mean is we didn't use stop motion in the climactic Clownzilla sequence, but there was stop motion done at Fantasy 2. Specifically, the shadows were stop motion animated. And Gene, you had a neat setup. You know, I presented Gene, how do we get shadows on a wall that we shot in Santa Cruz, and what was your solution?
Actually, we built I'm trying to think of what the scale was. It was probably like 1/24th scale or something like that. Recreated that sidewalk and brick building that was behind the bus stop. The group of people standing on the bus stop where the clown starts making shadows, and a big, what was that, a T-Rex, I think, or something?
Yeah, the T-Rex was the clown. It went from a bunny rabbit to a hula dancer to the Washington crossing the Delaware.
And then the T-Rex eats one of the people. The shadow eats one of the people. And so we recreated the sidewalk and building behind the people in a smaller scale, but building in the different shapes so that when we put the shadow on them, animated the shadow out of the camera on those shapes, it followed the contours. Something that on the computers today, it would be one of those things you could do a lot easier than you could pre-computers. So in order to get the subtleties I was talking about before, that is those little details, so it didn't look flat like it was stuck on, it really looked like it was contouring on these walls. And even the quality of the shadow changes when it changes direction and shape coming off of a single light. So it integrates, I think. It looks like it's really there.
No, and then the matter of transparency of the shadows, Gene he pegged it, and what we had is basically we had Justin Cohn animating stop motion. Basically, it started with a clay wired armature thing in the rabbit, but then I went to an easier sheet cushion foam with a wire armature. It was a two-dimensional animated thing, and we just animated the shadow on the wall. So actually animating the shadows, and then composited, and the only trick was a transition between when the dinosaur got lethal. We went from a transparent shadow to an opaque,
to much darker shadow.
Yeah.
And then it was a kind of extensive rotoscoping to split out the person that got eaten and rotoscope them down so that the shadow actually cuts them off and they go down and disappear. So that plate was shot with and without that person there.
Yeah, the climax of that sequence was the clown jumps straight up, and Mike Joyce and I fabricated this little armatured clown puppet, and we shot it in a traditional rear projection setup. The fun stuff was when, with the cocoons, replacing these big cotton candy cocoons, in place of the actors that were being cocoon gunned. The rays were different than any rays that you would conventionally use. It was a crazy. How do you come up with a clown ray? So I threw that. I said, well, I kind of want it to look like this squiggly thing. What do you do? Was that hand rotoscoped? Some of those rays.
I think Brett did it. Yeah, Brett
Mixon.
Mixon. Brett Mixon. I find it challenging to blow, to do models, scale models of. I prefer doing things that could be real too, and fooling people where they don't know, and that was real. Even though it's clowns and everything, it's a truck, so it's real, and you don't want people to think it's a model, and so it's always a challenge to do that. And one of the things is making sure that this scale you choose, which time and money has something to do with it, but you don't want to get too small, or no matter what you do, it's not going to work unless it's way in the distance. You can put it way in the distance. If you don't have the money, you talk the directors into don't get so close, and find a way so that you don't give it away. But what the materials you choose to make it out of are critical for explosions. Depending on what kind of explosion, what you want it to look like, it's what you build it out of, how you build it. More than what the explosive device is, because a lot of unsuccessful stuff over the years that I've seen, it's because the model was built too tough, and it wasn't built out of materials that would come apart and scale right. So the pyrotechnician was forced to put in real powerful primacord to blow it apart, and then the problem with that is that even if you shoot it at an incredibly high frame rate, and now you see it, now you don't, because primacord is an incredibly fast explosive.